A lot of times I think pastors in their minds don't focus on them because teenagers don't tithe, children don't tithe.
Right.
But
It's not immediate results.
Yeah, our currency in ministry is not money, it's souls. So we got to get the right currency. And we got to mobilize the adults and reach the adults too, but the fields are ripe already for harvest. So we don't miss it.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Christ and Coffee podcast. My name is Pastor Haig, and today we have Greg Stier on the program. He is the founder of Dare to Share, which trains young teenagers on how to have healthy conversations and equips them to sharing the gospel with their peers. We hear Greg's powerful testimony in this conversation and learn how God called him to do Dare to Share full-time right after the Columbine shootings. We're going to hear how this ministry has grown and developed into a global movement. But before we jump into today's conversation, I do want to read our verse of the week, which comes from 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. With that said, please grab some coffee and enjoy this Christ-centered conversation. Welcome, Greg, to the Christ and Coffee podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
Hi, nice to meet you, and I'm really glad to be a part of this.
This is amazing stuff. So I asked this question to all my guests. How do you drink your coffee?
I'm drinking it now, and cream and Splenda.
All right.
Yeah. I'm not a coffee snob. I just need it. And the only thing I would say is not decaf.
That's good, especially for youth ministry. You need a lot of energy for youth ministry.
Decaf was a result of the fall, and I can't prove that exegetically, but I will.
It's not natural because they kind of took God's creation and took away what it's supposed to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's biblical precedent for that because it's an alteration of God's good plans.
I think we're going down a theological path that leads to either truth or a cult. But either way, we're having fun.
Well, at least they'll drink the coffee, not the Kool-Aid. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
So you're the founder of Dare to Share. But before we talk about that, what was your teenage years like?
Well, my growing up years were before my teenagers years. I was raised in a very violent inner city home. Three of my uncles were competitive bodybuilders and street fighters. My fourth uncle was a bouncer. My fifth uncle was a Golden Gloves boxer, judo champion, war hero. The Denver Mafia, there was a mafia family, believe it or not, in Denver called the Smoldones, and they nicknamed my uncles the Crazy Brothers. My mom was the only girl in the group, and all my uncles were afraid of her because she fought with a baseball bat. I was a one-night stand, never knew my biological father. My mom traveled from Denver to Boston to have an illegal abortion, changed her mind last minute. She got talked out of it by my Uncle Tommy and my Aunt Carol, came back, had me, was living in shame. Like the woman at the well with the baseball bat, filled with rage. And a hillbilly preacher, nicknamed Yankee, planted a church in the suburbs of Denver and reached my toughest uncle, my Uncle Jack, with the gospel. My Uncle Jack had never heard the gospel. My Uncle Jack went to jail for choking two cops out at the same time. That's how powerful he was.
Oh, you're not joking about the bodybuilding stuff then. Wow.
No, my family, and seriously, I mean, they were rough. And he had never heard the gospel that Jesus died in his place for his sins. That salvation wasn't by being good. It was by facing the fact you're a sinner unable to save yourself and that Christ died in your place on the cross. And if you place your faith in him, you have eternal life. This hillbilly preacher explained that and said, does that make sense? My Uncle Jack said, hell yeah, that was a sinner's prayer. He trusted Christ. He brought 250 people out to Yankees church in 1 month. And then they began to fall like dominoes. I went into Yankees church as a 11, 12-year-old, got equipped to share my faith. First person on my heart was my ma. And I began sharing Christ with her. And it took 3 years. When I was 15 years old, I was able to lead her to Christ and disciple her. Not because I was an extraordinary teen. I was an ordinary teen who was given extraordinary training. And so that's kind of why I believe in youth ministry. The power of the gospel and the potential of youth is because a hillbilly preacher who's still alive today and has a YouTube channel that just passed 4 million views. Yankee Arnold, believe it or not.
Yankee Arnold. That's actually his name, or is it a nickname?
It's a nickname, but it's Ralph Yankee Arnold. And if you look him up on YouTube, he's a trip. He's like 4 reasons Calvinists are stupid. Like he'll do like he speaks. He's old school King James only, but he's clear on the gospel, and he loves Jesus, and he loves teenagers. And I mean, I'm grateful for the investment he made in our lives. Changed our family.
Yeah, literally from a path of destruction to a path of equipping the next generation to know the gospel. That's quite the story. Amazing. And I love when your testimony kind of marks your current ministry, and I love how God does that. So you're actually practicing what you preach, and you lived through it. You saw the effects of, hey, I'm a 12-year-old who barely knows the Bible, but God could still use me. And I think that's such problematic theologies we have in our church cultures, where we kind of have these youth group kids. We put them in Sunday school. We put them in youth group. They have no direct connection with the Sunday service. Then they graduate off to college. More than half of them don't come back, and churches are wondering why. And I find that if we don't equip them to do the work of the church, or don't let them see that they're the current church, you have these really weird disconnects with people once they leave the nest. And the solution is not just to teach them the biblical truth, but to apply the biblical truth and go out and into the world. And that's why I love what you're doing, Dare to Share. So how did that come to fruition?
Well, I planted a church with my buddy here in Denver, March 12th, 1989. Had the youth ministry itch, so I started Dare to Share a couple years later on the side, and was pastoring and doing Dare to Share at the same time. And then April 20th, 1999, the Columbine High School shooting took place.
In Colorado, that's where you're
in
from.
Colorado, my wife's a public school teacher in the same district. I knew a lot of the kids at Columbine, and it rocked me. And so I resigned from the church to do Dare to Share full time, because I really felt that I love the local church. I always say, and I heard this somewhere else, the church is God's plan A. There is no plan B. But I realized that the best way I could serve the church is not as a pastor, but as an evangelist that equipped God's people, specifically youth leaders and teenagers, for the work of service of sharing the gospel and making disciples. So been doing that full-time ever since, and we've been privileged to train literally millions of teens across the nation, around the world, over the last 3.5 decades, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. So what about Columbine that really rocked you to the core? Because it seems like that was also a turning point with the mass shootings we're constantly hearing about. Troubled teens get into the dark web.
Yeah, and there were shootings before Columbine. There's been shootings after. It's what I call the terrible yardstick that every school shooting, for whatever reason, has been measured by. And I think what got me was, what if the 2 shooters had heard the gospel and believed?
Yeah.
What potential shooters are out there that didn't shoot because they heard the gospel and believed? And so I really began to really have my heart broken for schools and teenagers, and what it would have looked like if we raised up a generation of bold witnesses on public school campus, Christian school campuses, homeschool co-ops, that were unashamed of the gospel. And it, flashback to my childhood. I mean, that's what I was raised in. We went out, we did Friday night soul winning every Friday night. We'd gather together, 50 to 100 of us, and we'd go hit the malls and share Christ. And all of us had shared Christ with all of our friends and neighborhood friends and school friends. It was such a natural part of what we did. I thought, what if that happened everywhere? We could see true revival. So, yeah, I think it was that thought, like, and not just the school shooting. There's a slow death. The kids that don't know Christ, they don't have identity, belonging, and purpose.
Right. And that's the prime years for people to find it.
Yeah. So that's kind of the why.
Yeah. Amazing. I became a born again Christian 16 years old, and it was defining. And I remember, like, once you get a youth group kid as a youth pastor, they're the main evangelist, and that's the thing for any culture. If you want to reach a culture, a generation, the pastor shouldn't be the ones doing the evangelism. They should be doing the equipping, and the people of that generation or culture should be the ones doing the actual evangelism.
You know, I just got back from the Philippines and was talking to the pastoral team. It's a church called CCF. That's the largest church in the Philippines, huge. And the idea of moving from a quarterback to a coach, like I'm going to equip them to do the work of the ministry, does two things. Number one, it advances the gospel farther because teens have a sphere of influence is huge. Secondly, it helps that Christian teenager to really own their faith because they're putting their social equity on the line, just like Abraham put Isaac on the altar, and his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was matured by what he was willing to do. When students put their social equity on the line by sharing Christ, they're spiritually matured exponentially as a result of their willingness to share the gospel.
Amazing. Yeah, of course. And they'll have the better effect and whatnot. But what do you think holds people back from just evangelism in general? Because it's not just teenagers who need to be equipped. I feel like church members themselves, like, well, what do you think are the roadblocks of evangelism in general? Because this is a huge problem. People aren't reading their Bibles, and people aren't willing to engage in difficult conversation. Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think there's stereotypes of evangelism. The guy out with a bullhorn on the street yelling at people, or the great evangelist that comes into town and fills a stadium, and they think, "Oh, I could never do that."
Yeah, I could be no Yankee Doodle, Yankee
Doodle.
Arnold,
Yankee Arnold, or a Yankee Doodle. And I think the other thing is fear. We're just afraid because it's awkward, and you could lose a friend, and sometimes people don't know what to say. Like, how do I even bring it up? And so we address all of that at Dare to Share. We train adults as well, but we talk about gospel urgency, fluency, and strategy. So urgency, you got to give them a big why. Why should I share the gospel? Fluency, you got to give them a what. What is the gospel? And we actually use a literal gospel acrostic to help them get the creedal message of the gospel memorized. And then strategy, what is that tool or methodology you're going to use to communicate that? And so I think all three of those, once you have all three of those in place, and once you learn how to bring up a gospel conversation, which we use 3 words: ask, admire, admit. Ask questions, get to know them, find out what they believe spiritually, admire what you can, and then admit the reason you're a Christian is you're so sinful, you need Jesus to save you. That leads to conversations, not presentations. So ask, admire, admit, and then lay the gospel out, right? Explain it. So once they learn that, it demystifies evangelism, and it makes it more of conversation.
That's great. I mean, that's what the heart of this podcast is, just to have Christ-centered conversations with people. And
great.
Do you find that, just like, forget about evangelizing with the conversations on the gospel, but just conversations in general, especially among Gen Z, have you noticed a decline in people's abilities to have face-to-face difficult conversations?
It's buried in their phones, you know?
Yeah.
And so one of the things we do is we train teenagers how to have literal conversations. So we do role-playing conversations, different scenarios, and taking a regular conversation and turning it toward Christ. We have students literally practice for 30 seconds, just giving each other eye contact, just 30 seconds straight. It is the most awkward 30 seconds of the entire week. But by the time they're done with the week, they have practiced gospel conversations with each other. They've had them with friends. They write a letter to a friend. They call a friend. They text a friend. And then they've hit the streets and engaged several people in gospel conversations. So to teach them that skill is really, really important.
Yeah, no, it's in much need, especially with the desensitization to violence we have, turning everything into a meme, reacting versus critically thinking and listening. I'm really troubled by a lot of kind of the state of what the iPhone has done, especially to those who kind of grew up with it. As a father of 2 young kids too, who know how to use YouTube. Like it's really important for just the basic communication skills to be in the church, because it also leads to how to communicate difficulties within church culture, community. You can't have community without conversation. So it's
Well,
like,
so it's a two-edged sword. So like on one side, yeah, that's the danger side, but there's another side that they do know how to use this. And so we say, hey, well, while you're here, post your personal story
yeah,
on Instagram. Like, oh, that's like a coming out party for a Christian. Like, oh, I'm a believer.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everybody's going to know it. And start, learn conversations, but also leverage what you already know to spread the gospel in creative ways using TikTok videos or whatever.
Exactly.
And so you can do both, but they're definitely weaker in conversations face to face.
That's wild. And it makes sense though, because I also think a lot of problems will be avoided if you could just have face to face, eye contact conversations. But at the same time, there's that the what we're doing right now. We're put this on social media. We're gonna clip this, put it on TikTok, so we could have people jump into this Christ-centered conversation. Amazing. So, any great success stories or testimonies? I'm sure you have hundreds, but anything that's sticking out you would like to share that you've seen a whole culture shift in a youth group from being just a static thing to a mobile evangelistic arm of a church?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been like, I'll give you one story. So there was a youth leader 7 years ago that kind of went through our training. And what struck him is moving from a quarterback to a coach, because he was inner city Memphis. He's a black youth leader that ministered primarily to black students, and they were, right in the hood. I mean, Memphis is #1 crime rate for murder, and so he thought I could just have the coolest youth group in town and be the coolest youth leader in town. But he got it. He was a former professional football player, so he got the whole analogy, move to a coach. So he started doing that, and I mean, youth group started really growing. They had a black teenager get shot by a white cop on their church property. And it's an African-American church, so the church was up in arms. The pastor had him preach on Sunday, and he goes, how many guys angry? How many guys upset? How many guys want to burn this city down? He got the church all whooped up. And he goes, I do too. He goes, but what did Jesus say? Jesus said, forgive that cop. Jesus said, build bridges, don't burn them. So he started a ministry called Riot Starter out of that. That was Righteous Riots, where they would do prayer walks through the city and share Christ along the way. All the teenagers, they would unite with other churches. They build relationships with police officers. Once a month, they'd have meetings with them and city officials. It blew up to the point where he resigned from his church, and now he runs riotstarter.org. And his goal is every major urban community to unite the urban churches together through the youth to bring a gospel solution to a cultural problem. That's one story that's blown up, Yeah. We have so many teenagers and youth leaders on mission can shift a culture.
And do you feel like there's a big shift happening among Gen Z with like just the amount of young guys specifically showing interest in church? What do you think is going on there? And
I think some of there's so many messages, you're getting shot at, I talked to a guy last night, Ben. I was going to a restaurant. My wife's like, let's eat at Bada Bing. And I'm like, okay. So I go to Bada Bing, which doesn't serve Italian food, by the way. It serves Nepalese and Greek food. I'm like, I don't understand. But
it's cultural appropriation. Okay.
Good food. I'm like, whatever. We're going to eat here. And so we eat. I mean, I'm waiting for the food, and I meet Ben. He's 25 years old. He's an MMA fighter. I start talking to him because he's waiting for his food. I go, do you go to church anywhere? He goes, I went last week for the first time in a long time. I go, why? He goes, because of what's happening in this culture. I feel like I need an anchor. And I was like, well, you don't anchor an anchor to the boat. You anchor it to something solid. Do you know Christ? He didn't know the gospel. He heard the gospel. It was one of those, it does not happen every time, but he's like, I'm ready. He put his faith in Christ.
Amazing.
And got his number for follow. I mean, I think Ben, for me, represented the questions and confusion in this generation, and they're looking for hope. They're just showing up. So the wind is blowing. We got youth pastors, we got to hoist our sails, everybody, and catch that wind.
Yeah.
I believe we have potential for some great spiritual awakening or a hot mess. And most likely it'll be it'll be both.
It's probably going to be both because that's part of why people are looking for something beyond what they were promised.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems like this. What are your thoughts on the whole Charlie Kirk effect? Because I mean, it seems like this ministry started with the Columbine shooting, and how has our society evolved or changed till this assassination?
Yeah, it reminds me. Actually, I was talking to our board this morning. It reminds me of the response right after Columbine High School, because there was a big spiritual, ministries were started and things were happening, prayer vigils, and there is an effect. I was in Manila when I got the news, and I feel like people are shocked. I mean, it wasn't just that. There was the stabbing on the bus in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
There was a school shooting
in
just
Denver
down
too.
In Evergreen, Colorado. I mean, that's 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
Minutes away. And so all this was happening, within a few days. And I think it got everybody's attention, and they're like, something is happening. And I've heard sound bites, and maybe it was of Charlie Kirk or maybe someone else, but I think that, this, tragic assassination, just horrific, woke people up, and they're like, we need God. We need something. We need to figure this out.
Yeah.
I'm not a sociologist, but I don't think you have to be a sociologist to see that.
Right.
There is something going on. Even before this, the big college gatherings and Unite and all the, college students making decisions. We're seeing it with teenagers. We've seen more response to the gospel in the last 3 years than, last, several years combined. It's God is up to something. And I don't think it's just in the United States. The UK is, up in attendance of young men. I was in Finland a couple months ago, 3,000 young people on fire, mostly from, around Finland, that were just together worshiping. Something's global. I think God is, and I mean this in a good way. I wrote a book called Radical Like Jesus. So when I use the word radical, I mean it like Jesus, not radical for Jesus. We don't want to be around them. We want to be radicals like Jesus, radical love, radical grace, radical mercy, radical holiness, radical truth, right? I believe God is radicalizing the remnant in a good way. And I think the danger is that it turns into just a political action committee.
Right.
I think the opportunity is, regardless of politics, I'm very conservative politically myself, but the transformation happens, transformed heart, right? Renewed mind, then change policies. That's the order.
Right. Not forced. Yeah.
Yeah. Revival of the heart first, and then renewal of the mind. And then all that, Thoreau said, for every 1,000 hacking at the leaves of evil, one strikes at the root. There's not a government program or a political party or a moral handbook that would ever reach my family. The gospel did what all of that combined, multiplied by 1,000, could never do.
Yeah. Amazing.
Turn street fighters into street evangelists like that.
Yeah. And now you're sharing the gospel last night to an MMA fighter at a fake Italian restaurant that serves Greek food, and he gave his life to the Lord. It comes full circle. Awesome.
Full circle.
What are the questions the current high school kids are asking? What are the kind of main hot button issues you find?
Well, the LGBTQ, that's a huge thing. What does the Bible have to say about that? Is that a sin? If so, why? I have a friend who's gay. Is he going to go to hell? I mean, it's just all the stuff. We actually wrote a curriculum on it called Hard Questions, because I didn't feel in youth ministry anybody was dealing with it.
Right.
And so the way we approach it is we can be 100% truthful and 100% loving, which is a hard combo. Right. And speak the truth. Bible's very clear on those issues, but be loving. The goal is to engage, not enrage, and to win people over to the cause of Christ and the message of Jesus. And so that's a huge question. I also think another big question is, 30 years ago, a lot of people in America specifically believed in the Judeo-Christian general thought, right? And now I think in a lot of ways we're more Hindu than Christian, not technically Hindu, but in India, there's like what 33 million gods, right? Well,
Yeah.
we don't say that per se, but the average, well, what's good for you, Allah's good for you, and Hindu, if you have a Hindu god, that's fine as long as you're sincere. It's less about. So I think helping them know Jesus claimed, "I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me."
Yeah. So like the synchronization and the plurality of religion, like it's kind of pagan, not traditional Christian. Yeah, that definitely is a huge shift. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's very important to kind of clarify. I'm a Christian, but I also believe X, Y, Z God. Yeah, I think that's something we have to be aware of.
Well, and I think presenting the gospel in a way where also I think works are a default, um, our default setting.
Right.
And last week I was preaching in Manila, and I used the illustration of a ladder and a chair. That every world religion is a ladder.
Hmm.
The five pillars of Islam, the eightfold path of Buddhism, the 10 commandments of Judaism. You can just, different rungs for different religions. But if you do this and stop this and try this, then you'll make it up to the top, heaven or paradise or nirvana or whatever. But only Christianity is a chair where we don't climb, we rest on the finished work of Christ on the cross. And I gave the gospel from sitting in a chair and invited people to place their faith in Christ. And I think that's always been a big challenge because humanly, we want to work our way. And Protestants do it. Turn, try, commit, surrender. I'm like, okay, really? How much? And how do you know? And what's interesting is when you learn how to rest in what Christ has done, then you run to pick up your cross, not because you have to keep it or earn it or prove it, but because you're grateful for what Jesus did on the cross.
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, and I think that's what's the radicalness of our message is it's already done, and you just gotta accept and surrender and embrace the God who already did the work for us. And
Amen.
like you said, that's what makes Christianity unique compared to any world religion, philosophy, ethical code. And yeah, so sometimes the church loses sight of that message too, which is the sad part. And that's why there's a constant need for renewal, revival, and having the young people see that gospel message through a new fresh lens. And it's a kind of always invigorating and refreshing to see kind of their perspective on this eternal truth. Because I think that at the heart of the Protestant movement, it's you take the unchanging truths of the gospel to the changing times. We have that flexibility, that double-edged sword, but at the same time to be aware of what needs to be said to the changing times with the unchanging truth of Jesus and what he's done. So it's amazing that you've been in youth ministries for so long. Do you feel like it's definitely a calling, or do you feel, or because again, I did youth ministry for like I did my 5 years. It's kind of like I did my service for the church. Now I'm going to move on away from the youth ministry.
Yeah,
I know, but I know other people who are just called to it. Does this?
I'm no apostle, but
Yeah,
I have an apostolic calling toward teenagers. I got offered a mega job the other day. They said you could keep doing Dare to Share and it would change the scenario and all this other stuff. And he said, would you pray about it? And I'm like, no.
you already know. You've been praying about it.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
He's like, do you need time? I go, no. I go, I'm humbled and flattered. I am not done until our vision, every teen, everywhere, hears the gospel from a friend. And how do we do that? To and through the local church. So you don't have to be in youth ministry. Lead pastors, I believe, have the most influence on youth ministry than even youth leaders, because they determine the hire, they set the budget, and they determine the focus. And I believe it's time for entire churches to rally around the next generation and mobilize them. If I was a business guy, which I'm not, and I knew 80% of a certain demographic was most likely to buy my product and sell my product, I would put all my marketing money into that. And 80% of those that come to Christ do it by the time they're 18 years of age. And so, and a lot of times I think pastors in their minds don't focus on them because teenagers don't tithe, children don't tithe.
Right.
But
our immediate results.
Yeah, our currency in ministry is not money, it's souls. So we got to get the right currency And we get to mobilize the adults and reach the adults too. But the fields are ripe already for harvest. So we don't miss it. And we just did a research project on what happens to a youth ministry that's gospel advancing, disciple multiplying versus a typical youth group. It's free. I'd encourage any pastors, youth leaders out there, anybody interested, go to don'tmissit.org and download the report. Powerful, that I think has application church-wide.
Any significant analysis that you could specifically mention?
Yeah, just high level, 600 youth groups researched through Clarity Research, 80% US, 20% national. Typical youth group versus a gospel advancing one. 3 times more overall growth in the gospel advancing, which is significant, right? 10 times more gospel conversations per student.
Wow.
So the average teenager in a typical youth group has 5 gospel conversations per year, which is not bad. The average one in a gospel advancing has 50 gospel conversations per year, which means basically they're sharing Christ every week, which is astounding. 3 times more teens discipling other teens, 40% more likelihood of a conversion because their peers are telling them about Christ, and 50% more likelihood those kids are connected into the youth group because it's their teen friend that's inviting them in that just led them to Christ.
Yeah.
So astounding. Matter of fact, our researcher said, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've never seen such a stark difference and no bad news. He's like, keep doing this. And my first response was like, yay, the New Testament's true.
Yeah. No, I remember, I love the line in, if it's the 1 John where it says, we're sharing this to you to make my joy complete. There's something about how like our joy is shared now. And I remember leading my best friend to the Lord freshman year of college, and like nothing rejuvenated my own faith than seeing that actually happen. Like, wait, God could use me for this? And I think that gets lost as well, just how the impact of being a evangelist it makes your faith go stronger and stronger.
It does. And you feel, like you understand that the power is not in you. The power is in the message. But God uses us. You look at 1 Corinthians 1, the preaching of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. The Greek word is where we get our English word moronic. But to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. And then God chooses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. So he uses a moronic message and morons to change the world so that no one may boast before him. He gets all the glory because of this message of simplicity.
Right.
And these messengers who are simple, and he gets the glory because his kingdom is being built.
Do you find that just this like, oh, I'm not ready to share, or I need to know my Bible more to share? How do you tackle that question? Because I feel like that's a common critique, especially someone like me who has perfectionistic tendencies. How do you break that?
Well, I think training, you need, training is key. So how do I bring it up? How do I explain it? So we use we do a 5-minute video on YouTube. If you just Google Greg Stier Crash Course in Evangelism, it's 5 minutes long. And take off to touchdown. How do I fuel up with the right motivation using an airplane analogy? How do I get passengers on board, right? Prayer, care, share. How do I take off? How do I begin that conversation? What's my flight plan? The GOSPEL. How do I land the plane, right? And then when it comes to not having the answers, we give students and adults a get out of jail free card. One statement. I don't know, but I'll try to find out, and let's meet again. So I tell people, don't feel like you have to know everything. You don't. I think we got to be like Charlie Kirk, right? He's always, got an answer, blah, blah, blah. It's good. Or that Cliff, just always on the campus, knowing what to say and how to, we're not like that. Well, they didn't start like that either. You ask questions, you get stumped, you go back, you study, you continue the conversation. So I don't know, but I'll find out, and let's meet again.
Yeah, no, that's the marker of a disciple. And do you feel like once you evangelize someone, do you think what's the follow-up? It's a discipleship journey. So I remember I revitalized a church in New York City 10 years ago, and I had my vision. It was all discipleship related. And this senior executive on a pretty big church planning network pretty much saw my model and was like, "You're focusing too much on discipleship, not evangelism." And I got what the person was trying to say. You need more outreach events and whatnot. But for me, that was kind of offensive because it's like the whole thing should be discipleship. Evangelism is the first step of the discipleship journey. I know
Yeah.
it's semantics,
Well,
but
no, it's not semantics. It's a
yeah,
totally different philosophy. One is a come and see,
yeah,
outreach events, and come and see is fine. Come and see will never get the job done. You have to
yep,
combine come and see with go and rescue, right? And the first step is evangelism. So I tell people, everybody wants disciple multiplication.
yeah,
I say if you can't do this, if you can't add, you can't multiply. So you have to be able to have that gospel conversation. Then you can begin to multiply disciples. Addition, then multiplication. But what did Jesus say? Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. It's like I will turn you into this. So yeah, I feel like what we need as part of the discipleship process is evangelism training.
right,
And that often does not happen. What the typical Western view is, two believers who've been saved for 20 years meeting once a week for an hour to talk about stuff they should already know and should already be doing. It's not making disciples that make disciples. And the only way that happens is if right away they're equipped to simply, clearly share the gospel of Christ.
right,
So evangelism training is central to the discipleship process. But it is part of the discipleship process. What did Jesus say? In Matthew 28, right? Make them, mark them, mature them, and multiply them.
yeah.
Make them. How do you do that? Through evangelism. Starts with evangelism. Mark them through baptism. Mature them through teaching them to obey. One of the things they obey is the Great Commission, which means it leads to multiplication. Make, mark, mature, multiply. Or if you're Baptist, win them, dunk them, train them, send them.
I like that. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
That's well said. And how did you pivot the movement to be in a global? Did that just organically happen, or was it intentional, or just God opening doors to different countries? You just came from the Philippines. You're talking about Finland.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. For 25 years, we were just US based and doing mega conferences, filling arenas, training students. We always took them out sharing the gospel. It was awesome. Then in Israel 10 years ago, on Mount Arbel, where the Great Commission supposedly took place, I've never heard the audible voice of God, but a thought was planted in my brain, in my soul, it's time. And I ran up to our president and a friend and said, it's time. God's given me the green light. And they were like, we're there with you. And we put our hands in the middle. I got a picture right next to my desk of all our hands in the middle on Mount Arbel. Had no idea how to go global. But we discovered on that same trip, a lot of the global leaders we were with were using Dare to Share material. So they actually coached us and helped us. And now I think, like I said, last year with the Day of Global Youth Evangelism, 110 countries.
Amazing.
59,000 students mobilized in a day with and for the gospel. And we're not done until every teen is reached. So we need millions trained and equipped through the Day of Global. And yeah, it's exciting. It's a lot of fun. And you'll love this. I mean, everything we do is to and through the local church. We don't have off-campus groups of people who are like, no, go to your youth group. There's 5 million churches in the world-ish. Let's mobilize as many as we can to tear off a piece of the map.
That's wonderful, because sometimes like these parachurch ministries seem like a threat, but you're the opposite. You're encouraging, supporting, and equipping. Do you find that so how are you able to have such a broad net? Any sort of pointers? Because sometimes people make secondary things main things, and it gets tricky.
Yeah, we have pointers. Here it is. 5G theology.
Okay.
God's Son, God's Spirit, God's Word, and Gospel. We agree on these 5. We put our hands in the middle, and we don't talk about anything else.
I like that.
If you start talking about other lesser issues, you get disinvited from the table. You figure that out in your church foyer. We're here for one thing, and that is every teen everywhere hearing the gospel from a friend. But we do have a theological basis that we put our hands in the middle on. Simple.
That's great. That's great. One final question.
Yeah.
If you've had one message to share with the global church, what would it be?
Don't be ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. And make sure you're preaching the gospel of Christ, not a works-based salvation, not a turn, try, cry, commit, surrender, give all, go all in, Protestant version of a world religious approach to a ladder rung approach to salvation. Faith alone, sola fide, faith alone in Christ alone, by grace alone, for God's glory alone. Preach that message and mobilize your teams to do the same. That was 3 things I said to the global church, but I wove it into one run-on sentence.
We'll take it.
The Apostle Paul always does it. Long sentence.
Oh, that's fine for us. Thank you, brother. Thank you for your time, and it was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, my friends, for tuning in to the end of this Christ and Coffee podcast. I hope you enjoyed that Christ-centered conversation with Greg Stier. Please check out Dare to Share's information online and their resources they provide. You can check them out on their website and on YouTube. Also, please do us a favor. Most of our listeners are not subscribed to Christ and Coffee. Please just hit that like button or subscribe button. Help us promote this podcast and join us on our movement to connect Christians one coffee hour conversation at a time. With that said, I do hope you have a blessed week. We'll see you next time. And remember to stay caffeinated, my friends.